Okay, so a couple of housekeeping things, some things that we're working on. It was discussed at the conference. Lisa, I know you were there at the conference, but I know that the majority of you guys were not. So I'm going to pull up my notes real quick and just go over a couple of things that was discussed at the conference. There was an enormous conversation in the professional development committee about transaction coordinators. And the reason why the discussion took place was because transaction coordinators is something that Trek is starting to see some potential issues with, especially when there's TCs that are licensed in one brokerage, but they're working with and on behalf of agents in a different brokerage. So I don't know if you guys have encountered that, if you've had any pain points, but they're discussing that being a real concern because of the licensure side. So give me your feedback on that. If you guys have experienced that, has there been any pain points? What's your thoughts on that? No?
I have no thoughts. I've not dealt with that yet.
Okay. Well, we spent about 30 minutes in a working group and we came up with transaction coordinator potential issues. And they ranged, and so this is a working group. It ranged from potentially recommending to Trek that there be a specific license that maybe they consider putting in place for a TC, so that it would be a different type of clarification, essentially, of what they could do. We also talked about maybe the brokerage putting in some best practices when working with TCs that are outside of our company, so you guys can have conversations with the TC about what's required and making sure they're getting the proper documents signed. And also, making sure that things are clear with our policy, that doesn't cause any potential, impact or harm. So we're going to look at a lot of these different elements and hopefully put together some best practices for you guys on that. Okay.
What about TCs that are not licensed? Is there any issues there?
Well, there's always potential issues, right? So clarifying it, and I think that's a part of what we need to put together for our best practices. What's best practices when working with a licensed TC that's in their company, and then if they're not licensed at all, right? Because obviously there's some things that a licensed TC can do, but an unlicensed one cannot. Okay. So that's one of the things we're talked about. The other things we discussed at the committee or at the conference, the three biggest complaint areas. Okay, these are the three biggest Trek complaints that come through. One is licensure issues. Two is breach of fiduciary duties, and sales other category. And so one of the panels, they asked, what are the sales other complaints consist of? And so I thought this was a very interesting one. Misuse of forms. That is a part of the sales other. So if people are using outdated forms, if they're putting information in the forms in a location they're not supposed to, if they're reiterating verbiage that's already in the documents, all of that is classed as misuse of forms. So that's one. Negligent is another. So acting negligent, meaning potential breach of fiduciary duty. Letting clients access the home without the agent being present. That's a big one. And I know that we have, like this look on our face, like, are you kidding me? Agents really do this? Yes, they do this. I just had a client ask me that a couple of days ago. Is it okay if you just give me the code and I can go take a look at it? So then you don't have to interrupt your schedule. No, you can't. Okay. So just a reminder. And then I added in the negligence section, not knowing the forms or documenting things correctly is a part of that negligence. So just making sure we're being careful, crossing our T's and dotting our I's. Okay. I know, Leanne, you rant to me regularly, but it happens a lot. People entering homes that are not supposed to. So, all right. So that's kind of what we covered. The last thing that they talked about in detail was water issues. And this was actually something that was brought up in detail at the broker lawyer committee meeting. So for those of you guys working in land or farm and ranch, what have you guys encountered regarding water or potential issues on getting water well, septic, things like that. Are you seeing any issues? No? Okay. Well, you guys are rock stars for not having these issues. I think it's important to note you may have an issue at some point. Okay. So I am going to very briefly play the little clip it from the commission meeting that was on Monday, where one of the broker lawyer committee attorneys actually touch on very briefly the things that they discussed. And I thought he did such a great job in super easily breaking down some of the water elements that they're looking at. They're talking about maybe possibly a disclosure notice of some sort that Trek may be looking at regarding water, because it is such a hot topic right now in Texas. So I'm just gonna, it's better for him to say it than me. So I'm just gonna play this. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, let me make sure I'm putting my sound. Okay, when I push play, would you guys give me a thumbs up if you can hear it?
With all the Texas realtors. So good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Kestner, and good morning, commissioners. As you can tell or have heard, there's a few things going on with our contracts. And the Broker Lawyer Committee recently met on January 10th, which was only a week into after these new forms that we have were put out there. And so I'm first going to step back before I get into the commission language to report on some of the other things that we discussed during our meeting. And first, you'll see before you today, there's one form up for adoption. It's the notice of buyer termination, which adds language concerning the buyer's termination under paragraph 2A, third-party financing addendum, which now requires written documentation of the lender's reasons for denial. We didn't receive, as a committee, any comments on that, and we didn't make any changes to what was proposed by the commission at the last meeting. The next one that we discussed during the meeting, or next topic, is what is the definition of a legal holiday under the contracts? There's a lot of confusion right now on what qualifies as a legal holiday. And what is meant by the contracts, what we discussed during our meeting, is it points to doesn't point to, but the definition of legal holidays in the local government code, specifically chapter 662.021. And it's a very broad definition of holiday. And the committee discussed seeking the feedback of the commission on their thoughts on how broad do we actually want that definition to be. Right now, it includes both state and federal holidays, except for a couple exemptions. In the state holidays include Confederates Heroes Day. It includes Texas Independence Day, Emancipation Day, LBJ Day, which we don't think that many in the practitioners or the public understand to be actual holidays. I think it's more in lines of the way we think about when the title companies open or the federal holidays. So we would like the commission's feedback that we can then take back and discuss at the committee on what we actually intend by that language. Do we want it to be more in line with what I think the general practice is that we see, or do we want to keep it broad and tied to the actual statute? So we discussed language there that we can potentially add to better define it to stay the way it is, or potentially narrow it if it's something that we intend to do on that side.
All right, let me ask you guys a question on that. Will that be helpful to define what a legal holiday is according to the contract? I think this is an important element, because if you look at the law, the statute, there's holidays that we don't even know exists under the state holiday definition. And so that could potentially impact our client if we're working with a buyer and delivery for earnest and option money. And so I'm hoping that they move forward with this and can create maybe a working group and then come up with something to present in the next 3 to 6 months or so. So I just wanted to get you guys' feedback on that.
We also had a great presentation at our meeting by Brian Sledge on water issues. Brian is one of the leading water law experts here in Texas and represents many of the groundwater districts. And within that, Brian was discussing the availability of water being a major issue as we move forward in the state. And that the recent changes to the law, especially with ETJs and property owners being able to exempt themselves out of the ETJ, that the services are not being provided by the cities like they used to in the past. There's more of a hurdle. And this is becoming more of an issue, not just for developments, but for single family housing. So we had a presentation there. We brought that back and tied into this with some of the Sunset Commission review management recommendations in terms of disclosures. And so we're taking that back and looking at potential disclosures to make in regards to specific water rights, groundwater and surface water issues.
What do you guys think of that? Do you think that will be helpful at all? I'm hoping that they create some sort of a potential notice or disclosure notice that we can provide to our clients that counsels them on where do they go to find information on whether this piece of land they're looking at buying and maybe wanting to build on, what can they do? What can they do with the water? Where do they get the water? If there is like a well on the property, one of the things that was stated at the conference was just because there's a well in place that's providing enough water for a dwelling does not mean there will always be enough water, because wells dry out or, run out of water. So there's some potential issues there that I think that maybe a notice of some sort would be very, very helpful when we're working with our client. So I just wanted to let you guys know that.
We also, with the Sunset Commission, received management recommendations to look at adding various disclosures to the contracts related to insurance, related to above ground storage tanks, and a couple other matters that tie into the like private roads. We're taking that back to a disclosure working group to look at those recommendations and see if we want to add to the disclosures that are in the contract. We also looked at the backup contract addendum and adding notice or a receipt page for the additional option fee and the additional earnest money that's now allowed under the staged backup contract addendum. No longer do you have to put all the earnest money or option money up front. You can stage it to put a certain amount up front and a certain amount more when you go into second place. So we're looking at adding additional language there as well. And of course, what's on front of everybody's mind is the paragraph 12 commission language in the page 10. And there's a lot of confusion that's in the market that we think is hopefully largely education based. This is new language that is the license holders in the state and the public as well have used certain forms that the association, the trade association, Texas Realtors, has put out there over the last 6 months to a year. With the new language that we have in the contracts, certain of those forms have gone away and have been replaced by the language that's in the contract is still paragraph 12. And with that, we took the comments back. As everybody knows, we read every comment from every license holder, every member of the public, dozens upon dozens, hundreds and hundreds of comments. And going through those, they're largely repetitive of what we had when we made the initial change to the contract. And so in looking at that, we think that with the education that comes out, we're hoping it solves many of the issues. As the agents learn these contracts, as the public gets used to using the new contracts, we're hoping that's going to solve a lot of the issues. But we're open to taking additional steps. And we're open to looking at how do we clarify to make it better. But at our meeting on January 10th, with the contracts being a week old, we didn't feel we had enough data at the time to make an informed decision on whether changing anything up. I think by and large, everybody's tired of contract changes. Everybody wants to learn what we have and to figure it out. But at the same time, we want it to be consistent and for the public to be informed in a very clear and consistent contract. The language that's in paragraph 12, I can answer any questions that you might have on it today. But the one comment that we got over and over again is not understanding how paragraph 12 works in with page 10. Paragraph 12 being a seller contribution, that's coming out of the seller's pocket. Page 10 just being a disclosure that the amount of cooperative compensation between brokers. Those are two separate amounts. Page 10 is not enforceable. It's just informational only, but those two amounts are intended to stack on top of each other. And I welcome any specific questions that you have and to answer those, but
Okay, so give me your feedback. Do you think that they're on the right track? Do you think that the way that they changed the contracts has been helpful? I mean, I know we keep talking about this over and over again, but I keep getting agents asking me questions about the compensation and am I doing it right? Specifically because an agent on the other side that said that that's not how we do it. And so I just want to remind you guys, as we're going through this and talking about it regularly, don't let uneducated, unskilled agents on the other side of a transaction who does not take the time to get educated tell you guys what to do. So you know what to do. Don't let them get into your head. Okay. I just think that's a really, really important reminder for all of you guys, because you can start second guessing yourself, and you guys know this. And so anyways, any issues you guys are having on the compensation conversations at all? What are you guys seeing? No? Wow, we're quiet today. Okay. Well, if you got no issues whatsoever or comments, then awesome, we're done. All right, I'm going to open it up to any last questions you guys have. I've got a couple of last things I'm going to touch on before I let you guys go, but I want to make sure I'm getting you guys and hearing you guys out. So any last things you guys want to discuss or talk about? God, sheesh. All right. Well, the only other things I wanted to just remind you guys of is 7-day submission time. Okay. So on these contracts, we say this over and over again. We have to have 7 days to be able to review and kick things back for you guys to get things fixed and resubmitted in time for the CDA. We are discussing, at one point I had sent out a message to everybody saying that a late submission could result in a $25 fine. We're looking at potentially an escalation of that for people who don't seem to take that seriously. I'm hearing feedback. So if you guys feel like that there is a better way for us to help coach and mentor you guys on getting those things submitted on time, we're definitely open for that. But you have to understand that one, there's a liability there. If there is something that is a mistake and it's not corrected in time for closing, it opens you guys up for potential TREC complaints or ethics complaints because documents were not used correctly. So just keep that in mind. But also, when there's a hurry up and a rush to get those CDAs out after things have been fixed, if it's too close to closing, we have to basically shove our whole everything aside to make sure we get that done in time. And so that can be a big pain point. I also understand that there's some delays on review, so I'm addressing that definitely. If you guys run into any issues whatsoever, let me know, please. That's how I handle things on the staff side. Okay. And last but not least, compensation agreements between brokers do not go on the contract. And so I'm going to reiterate that over and over again. Compensation agreements between brokers, agents are not a part of the transaction when it comes to a buyer and a seller's contract. So you do not want to put the compensation agreement between brokers into the contract in paragraph 22. That is a separate agreement. You can absolutely share that agreement with your client though. So that way they are full transparency. Your buyer knows that your fee is covered and they're not concerned. Okay. I think that's all I have. So I just want to make sure I'm keeping you guys in the loop on all of that. If there's no other questions, then I'll let y'all go. If you are going to stay over for the agent training, I'm going to go over how to do the luxury presence digital presentation on the back end. So you're welcome to hang out for a couple of minutes. I have to go potty and then I'm going to jump back on and do the training. Okay.
Will that also be recorded so we can replay it? I do have to run off.
Yes, actually, I recorded it yesterday.
Okay.
Like I said, I've been loading things in. If you guys do want to know what our channel is, let me really quickly share this with you guys. Hold on. We have a heck of a lot of stuff on the back end. You look up White Label Realty Co. and oh, really? But I'll send it out to you guys because there is multiple different, I'll send the channel out. There's multiple different trainings that we have on the back end. And we also have playlists. And in those playlists, I'm starting to compile right here, white label tutorials. So recorded tutorials on how to use the different systems, but in smaller clippets, like 10 to 15 minutes long, instead of it being a long training. So you guys can select the targeted tutorial that you want to see. Okay. So, all right. That's all I got. I appreciate you guys. we will see you next Thursday, I believe. Double check the property-based calendar because that's where it is housed. So just make sure you look there. Okay. All right. We'll see you
Thank you.
guys. All right. Have a
Have a
good
good day.
Thank you.
Bye. Jeanette, how do I stop the recording? Hold on.
It's a great question.
Oh, it moves when you're